have I have prepared some slides just to give you some background for the benefit of those who may be following up the situation in Thailand carefully or closely rather. I told Nageeb in our conversation this morning as part of our preparation that I was not an expert on Thai politics, being a Thai, but I have been observing, what has been happening in Thailand for so many years. So what I'm going to provide would be my observations. As I said, I'll be starting with some background. I think in order to understand what is going on in Thailand, you will have to look at what was happening in Thailand. And I pick up 2014 as the starting point, the point of departure. But just want to mention maybe two things that before 2014 there were regular protestations, especially protestation and anti-protestations, of course. So you got the advent, the phenomenon of yellow and red before 2014, which in a way was spread to Malaysia, I think, at some point. So before 2014, you were having red and yellow protestations, symbolizing pros and anti-Thaksin. So just a bit background before 2014. From as many of you know, I highlight some dates here because I found these dates important. So the first date was actually 22 May 2014. I recall that I was having, I was sitting in a regional consultation with the one UN Special Rapporteur in Bangkok, and it took me about 3-4 hours in order for me to reach home because people were panicking. But the next morning, a lot of people were going out and giving flowers to the army by the time. So on 22 May 2014, we witnessed a coup d'etat led by General Prayut Chan-o-cha, who actually announced the National Council for Peace and Order. So they took control, of the government, and Prayut later became the Prime Minister of Thailand. 2016, another date that the king, the Ramanite, passed away, and his son, the Crown Prince, became the king. There's another date. A big change in the Thai society for many people. Then April 6, 2017, you got the Thailand got the new constitution ratified by a referendum. I want to mention here that Thailand has, as far if I am not mistaken, 20 constitutions already. So we have, I think we have the highest number of constitutions in the world, maybe. Then February 7, 2019, this is another interesting event. I recall I was admitted in the ICU, and from ICU I was watching television, and we heard the news, which was shocking for many of us when the king rebuffed his sister, who was nominated by the Thai Raksa Chart Party. This party was later dissolved by a court, before the elections, and this disqualified many politicians, well-known politicians in Thailand. Maybe just one observation here that before the elections date, the His Majesty the King sent message to the Thai citizens, urging them to support good people and not those who create chaos. I found this quite interesting. Next slide, please. Um, so, uh, what is what was going on in Thailand? So I take what is going on in Thailand from 24th March 2019, when we were having general elections, just to have the same prime minister and some same ministers. Then another important date was actually November 20th, 2019, when the court disqualifies rising opposition figure, Thanathorn, from Future Forward Party. The party was later dissolved. And this actually um, um, uh, generate demonstrations, especially flash mobs in on the campus of universities around the country. As I said, the party was completely banned. Then March 22, in every single country around the world, Thailand, like many other countries, the advent of COVID-19 pandemic. So in order to stop or to control, coronavirus, the government, came out with a rather draconian measures, which actually in a way control the student protest as well. However, um, next slide, please. The protestations pick up, especially in July, and I want to emphasize two things here. First of all, in July 18, amid restrictions, activist groups, student groups of free use movement, they staged the protest in Bangkok, and they demand, as Nageeb has already mentioned, dissolution to the parliament, amendment of the constitution, and an end of harassment of the government's critics. Um, uh, in August, a very surprising demand, never done openly in the past in the Thai history, when human rights lawyer made an unprecedented call for reform of the monarchy. The protester, demands, of course, that the monarchy, they put forward 10 demands for, as I mentioned, monarchical reform, including abolition of lèse majesté law, which is not a separate law, is one article in Penal Code, Article 112, and curbing the powers of the king. Of course, protestations continue until now. Next slide, please. Um, the then I put October here. Um, uh, as I said, some protestations going on regular basis. Next slide, please. Just want to end with two dates here about what is going on in November. So in November 2017, the legislature debated the seven proposal to amend or change the 2017 constitution, including a draft. Uh, the draft proposed by ILO with about 100,000 of people of signatures sign up, for the amendment. In the Thai constitution, it allows 50,000 signatures to propose the law, and this one got, as I said, about 100,000. And this is the first time that the law proposed by the people was debated in the parliament. The draft, unlike other proposals, did not rule out the change relating to the monarchy, reform to the monarchy of the monarchy, and it also stated that the 250 military appointed senators should be replaced with elected officials. And November 18, there were the votes at the parliament, and there were two motions to set up a constitution drafting committee passed. The one proposed um, by the people failed to receive enough support. The draft petition by the people received only 212 votes from the joint sitting parliaments of 732 members. According to the constitution, it needs at least half of the votes and at least a third of the Senate to pass. As I mentioned, two proposals were adopted that would allow for discussion of the constitution amendment without affecting the monarchy, and a drafting committee is to be set up after these motions are endorsed by the king. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, that there have been regular demonstrations, regular protestations, and these are some of the pictures that I got from different newspapers, including Reuters, CNN, Bangkok Post, and The Nation. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think you have seen, next slide, you have seen, this scene from televisions, especially if you watch international news like CNN, BBC. Next slide, please. This was on the 19th of November in front of the Royal Police Headquarters. Next slide, please. I just want to end this part with some statistic here in order for you to see another angle of not only protestations but also the way the military and now military-backed government have been doing so far. And I put the statistic of charges of different individuals since 2014, and the statistic was collected from by AICHR. I from 2014 to September 2019, you see that 99 cases of more than 100 individuals charged with Article 112 of Criminal Code. To my shock, when you saw with the highest sentence for 60 years reduced to 30 years. I think this is the highest punishment in the world for lèse majesté, for criticism of the monarchy. Then you also got 421 cases of individuals charged with defying NCPO announcement, which actually banning political gathering of more than 5 people. 117 cases of individuals charged with Section 116 of the Criminal Code, sedition and of incitement or incitement of sedition, and 20 cases of individuals charged with Sanitation Act. As I said, this statistic came from AICHR. I think this is the last slide. Am I correct? Yeah. So what actually, I know that I spent a lot of time on giving you some background already, but there have been some analysis, especially among observers and scholars studying about the Thai politics. Some analysis about the current protestations and my own observations in a conversation published in The Diplomat, in interview by Mercy Kuo, who interviewed Tamara Luz. Tamara is an expert of Thai politics at the Cornell University. And Tamara has analyzed in her interview given that demonstrators in Thailand today, as we mentioned already, demand for three things, including the reform of the monarchy, to subject it to legal, political, and fiscal oversight. And she said that the peaceful protestations are different radically from the past. Isham was talking about different student protestation in the 70s, in which I joined from time to time when I was a student. What are the difference of these demonstration protestations of the student? And she said, first of all, the Thai citizen, for the first time, that the Thai citizen openly challenged the role of the monarchy in the Thai culture and political life, which for her reveals revolutionary cultural shift, self-sensitive and less majestic laws that once prevented the Thai from publicly expressing their concerns about the roles of monarchy in politics no longer apply. That's what she said. And the institutions of the monarchy is now subject to public debates and the discussion, which I agree with it. I'm secondly, middle school, high school, and college-age Thais make up majority of the protester rather than older generations, which is also true. Who fill the streets in the color code protest in 2000s and red and yellow that I just mentioned. Um, and these youth demand different change, many change of Thailand's education system, strict gender conformity, constitutions, and others, including monarchy, as I mentioned a few times. And then the third one, social media plays a very important role, a prominent role in demonstrations, because these internet platforms are not subject to the same degree of control, by the government. Unlike televisions and radios, so protesters utilize social media to connect with each other and supporters around the world, which actually it's very true that it really enabled them to mobilize protesters very quickly. I would add to these three analysis of Tamara Luz from Cornell University. Of some of my observations. First of all, it's they do not have any particular leader in their protestations. So there is a lack of organized leadership. What we see is multiple mobile leaderless protests going on everywhere, and you got different groups, sometimes coming together, sometimes protesting separately. For example, United Front of Thammasat and Demonstration, they published on their Facebook in October 17 October 2020, in their Facebook, and they said everyone is a leader. So here, as I said, you got different groups protesting in different places around the country. For example, protest Udon will not tolerate. These are the names of different groups. Protest Udon. Udon is a province in the northeastern part of Thailand. Will not tolerate. Protest Isan is not afraid. Free youth movement, bad student movements, composed mainly of high school students. These are examples of different groups. So it's really multiple mobile leaderless demonstrations groups, and they use different tactics coordinated with different gestures, hand gestures, for example. And of course, this is quite new, but I think this will be remaining in this digitalized world. The second one, which I think is also quite different and important, that they adopt a new strategies, strategic narratives. which in the past characterized the protesters as red and yellow shirts. What is happening is that, although the current student movements are not using this color code, but the government is now characterizing them as, being red and yellow, which is, as I said, not only anti and pro-Thaksin, but also anti-monarchy. And the government is still using more or less the same narrative in order to damage, the public image of the demonstrators, in order to, as I said, to damage the image of demonstrator previously seen at, innocent students. And this is what is happening in Thailand. Whether or not this would be having impacts at Southeast Asian level, as I mentioned at the very beginning, that whether or not there be ASEAN Spring or ASEAN Autumn, I don't know. I there was a book launched, I think this year, and the book was written by Ruth Ben Kiet, and the book is entitled, Strong Men Mussolini to Present New Authoritarians. I think what we have been witnessing in South Asia on top of these demonstrations, that, the current leaders, including Prayut Chan-o-cha, like many other leaders in ASEAN, represents, a new breed of leaders, that's what she said, who work within the systems of democracies, but, we do them in undemocratic ways. We see this in different countries in South Asia, including, Cambodia, Indonesia, to Malaysia and Philippines, for example. So things that they do now, they are new because of social media. Less killings, but more mass detentions using legal tools, to silence those demonstrators. So that's what we are seeing in South Asia. We see as well that the more and more the leaders in South Asia, new authoritarians, come to power by elections, and they tend to use the legal loopholes, the weaknesses, in their governance and regulatory system and legal system to consolidate their power. And that, I think, what we see in the region. It's raining very heavily. Just want to notify that it's raining heavily here in Bangkok. I'm not quite sure if you can hear me well. The third one that I think is also important for us to look at is actually the advent of COVID-19 pandemic. And I think this COVID-19 is not only detrimental to economies and health of the people, but it really provides convenience for leaders, especially for them to impose very restrictive and draconian laws. It also, and we see in different countries, that, during this COVID-19, we see more and more inequalities and, precarities from political and civil, rights point of view. So I think, this is extremely, important as well. As I mentioned that, we see some common characteristics between what is happening in Thailand and in some South Asian countries. We really, see that uh, the, in some countries, for example, there are small to medium-sized protests organized in Laos for civil rights protections, in Malaysia for broadening polygamy rights, in Cambodia, Indonesia for labor laws reforms. So you see this emergence of some movements in some countries as well, but I'm not quite sure if they are going to following the example what is going on in Thailand. So I guess I'll be ending my presentation here. Sorry for taking a bit longer. Thank you very much indeed.